Good morning, and welcome back to Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Sheridan. If we have any announcements, now is a great time to send them in. We'll be monitoring the chat. You can also text Ian or me. Our phone numbers were in the order of service that was sent out by our dear Victor yesterday. So that reminds me I should probably grab that device just in case. Well, nothing so far, but if you have any announcements, send them in and we'll put them on there. Okay, so this morning's opening words, I'm just going to bring this down here because I'm short. Okay, this morning's opening words come from L.M. Montgomery. And keeping in mind, if you've missed the last couple weeks, the theme of this month's presentations is prayer and meditation. Okay, why must people kneel down to pray? If I really wanted to pray, I'd go in the deep, deep woods and I'd look up into the sky. And then I'd just feel a prayer. L.M. Montgomery. All right. Our morning music is a little riff on this sort of. It's the Muslim Adhan, which is the call to prayer. Please enjoy.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الصلاة خير من النوم الصلاة خير من النوم الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
And we're back. All right. So the next thing is the lighting of our chalice. So if I could get a hand on that. The lovely Grace Cannon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. To dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to serve human needs and to help one another. So at this time, you can send in your joys and concerns, and we'll light a candle for you. You can put them in the chat, or you can text them to either me or Ian, and we will be Johnny on the spot getting them in for you.
I do have an announcement.
Nice.
Cal Furnish is announcing something for worship next month. He says, I'd like to announce that the first and second Sundays next month are covered. The theme is covenant.
Ooh.
And Cal says he'd love to hear from anyone who would like to do a presentation on either of the Sundays in the second half of September. Thanks.
Thanks, Cal.
Thanks, Cal. And real quickly, I am just going to, if that is you, and please do volunteer. We need folks to step up and do presentations. There are presentations you can just read, and Cal can help you find that if you don't want to write your own. His phone number is 307-752-6989. That's one way to get a hold of Cal. There are other ways as well.
Joys and concerns, anything coming in?
I have one. Thank you. I have a simultaneous joy and concern. I am beyond excited to actually get to be in a classroom with my students again. I don't care if I have to wear a mask or a hazmat suit or whatever. I just want them to be with me where I can love them and give them safety and care. That, though, of course, comes with the concern, just wanting to make sure everybody's safe and everything. And, like I said, I'll do whatever I have to do safety-wise to be with them. And so I'm full of joy at that prospect.
I'll take that. We have Let's Light a Candle. Jolynn wrote in and said, safe travel to Gabriella as she returns to Vienna on Tuesday.
And thanks again, Gabriella, for your songs last week. Just absolutely beautiful. Tears to my eyes, beautiful. Any others coming in?
I've got a joy. I had an old friend from Laramie. She's lived all around the world. Haven't seen her in 10 years since we met up in Berlin. And she's moving back to Laramie and stopped by to see Grace and I on her way through.
Oh, cool.
So it was really great to see her and wish her success and happiness back in that weird little town up in the mountains.
Wonderful. And from Katherine Johnson, please light a candle of joy for the love I feel for my family and friends.
Wow, that's a good joy. It's the joyest of joys to have that.
Maybe no one has sent it in, but I feel like I'll speak for a lot of people who have a deep concern about the state of the post office and the world.
And everything that goes with that.
Yeah.
All of the ramifications.
Yes.
Number of rap songs come to mind, but I'll spare everyone.
I'll light I guess everything's sort of a joy and a concern, maybe, right? Just excited for coming to the end of the summer, the changing of the season. Looking forward to that. It's so hard to plan right now, but do what you can and come together with people when you can.
Yeah, safely.
Mm-hmm.
I might add on that note, it was lovely to see off Don Sopron and Claire. We safely gathered at Kathy Kint's house, and everyone was wearing masks pretty much, and we were all keeping a nice distance. And it was very lovely to see Gary from Buffalo, and Roger and Stacy were there, and and lots of good friends. And Dawn is moving back to Chicago, and Claire is on her way to Columbia, so big things for both of them. And it was nice to see them off.
That's cool. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Do one more for Joy.
Yes.
So we'll light one more candle for joys and concerns felt in our heart but not expressed. Thank you, please. All right. So our reading for meditation this week is from Thich Nhat Hanh. After the meditation, we'll play the Spirit of Life song. We'll listen to it once through, and then we'll sing it after. Let us be at peace with our bodies and our minds. Let us return to ourselves and become wholly ourselves. Let us be aware of the source of being, common to us all and to all living things, evoking the presence of the great compassion. Let us fill our hearts with our own compassion towards ourselves and towards all living beings. Let us pray that we ourselves cease to be the cause of suffering to each other. With humility, with awareness of the existence of life and of the suffering that are going on around us, let us practice the establishment of peace in our hearts and on earth. Thich Nhat Hanh. All right. So this talk, the presentation today, is entitled Schema of Prayer. I wrote it and gave this presentation 5 years ago in August also. And kind of looking back at it and reading it, I decided it needed some revamping. So I revamped it, and here it is today. All right. I'll start with a brief anecdote. When I was in high school, our psychology teacher, Mr. Rainey, taught us about the concept of a schema. He described it as a cognitive organizer. A schema, he said, is a way of categorizing objects, behaviors, and relationships, and other things that we experience in our lives. It's a conceptual framework for our minds to work from. For example, if I said to you, close your eyes and picture a cat. Some image of a cat would come into your mind, and no doubt for each of us, we'd have a different image in our minds, but these unique images represent our own experience of cat. Let's try another, a relationship this time. Close your eyes and imagine the relationship associated with the word mother. I'm sure most of us have a very different schema of mother. Even siblings would probably have a different schema of mother. Okay, one more, a behavior this time. Close your eyes and picture prayer. If we thought our schemas of a cat or mother were widely varying, it's likely nothing in comparison to how differently we perceive the activity, the action, the behavior of prayer. There's good reason for this variety. The religions of this world offer myriad versions of prayer. The one I'm most familiar with is the Christian version. In the book of Luke, Jesus Christ informs his disciples that to get God to open his door, one must first knock by way of prayer. He tells them that prayer looks like this. In a peaceful place, away from others, you say the following: Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever and ever. Amen. The Catholic Church offers a similarly formulaic prayer that can be offered up to the Holy Mother Mary. Hail Mary, full of grace, our Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen. For many Christian evangelicals, prayer is far less formal than those two examples. Instead, it's more of a casual, ongoing conversation between God and the supplicant. As one pastor described it to me, prayer is, quote, coffee with Jesus, unquote. Anglican churches have a Book of Common Prayer that's filled cover to cover with suggestions of prayers for the devout and is similar to the Siddur of Judaism. Some religions focus on prayer at certain times of the day. For a Muslim worshiper, the scheme of prayer may look like the Salat, which you guys got to see earlier. One of the 5 pillars of Islam. It's a formal prayer performed 5 times daily at prescribed times. This ritualistic prayer and worship involves greeting God by reciting the first chapter of the Quran. And though many of us picture this is our schema for the prompt of Islamic prayer, Muslims also have dua, which is an informal supplication prayer. If you're a Buddhist, perhaps your schema of prayer looks less like communication with a deity and more like a meditation on thoughts of loving kindness to mankind. Yet another schema for prayer could be in repetitive Hindu mantras, dwelling on Brahman, the divine source of all things. Or it could be in practicing yoga. And what about the atheist faith? If we want to call it that, which I don't think they do. My great-grandfather, an Ohio State University philosophy professor and the author of many books, was obsessed with the idea of prayer. In his book, Rethinking Religion, he states, the entire conception of prayer, which has marked traditional religion, has been based upon anthropomorphic animism, which regarded reality, with a capital R, as not only alive, but akin to man. He goes on to say that this overemphasis on a human-like God is childish and must be cast aside for an intelligent and objective view of the universe. He also quotes the poet Omar Khayyam. Here's the poem. And that inverted bowl we call the sky, where under crawling cooped we live and die. Lift not your hands to it for help, for it as impotently rolls as you or I. We may have all shared that sentiment, Omar, at some point or other, but it's a little hopeless for my taste this morning. So how do we know which of these wide-ranging schemas is right for us as individuals or as UUs? For some Unitarian Universalists, the word prayer can be something of a trigger. When the theme of this month was assigned, I had to chuckle a little at the fact that it couldn't only be labeled as prayer, but it had to be joined with meditation for those of us who bristle at the word due to some past trauma. A Unitarian Universalist named Carolyn McDade struggled with the same concept. Raised in a Southern Baptist home, she likely had a firm schema of what prayer looked like. Her world changed when she began to play the piano. The only time she felt freedom and a connection to something greater was when she sat at the bench creating music. Later in life, she came to the Unitarian faith and wrote the closest thing that I think we as Unitarians claim as prayer, the song Spirit of Life. We sang it in this fellowship this morning, and we do every other Sunday. Most of us know it by heart. It's full of supplication, and it connects us to each other as congregants, but also as citizens of the world and as members of the Unitarian Universalist faith. All right, here's one last anecdote for you. I sought counseling after my dad passed away when I was in college. I went to the mental health center on campus and ended up in the office, randomly sorted into the office of a middle-aged, balding, Jewish father of two named Lee. On paper, we were as different as two people could be. It didn't matter, though. I never learned more about myself or about how I associate with other people than from Lee. The most profound session we had began with my being incredibly upset at how after my father's death, I could no longer hear God or pray to him anymore. I subscribed at that time to the coffee with Jesus schema of prayer. It was really distressing to go from what felt like constant communication and company to silence and isolation was a jarring experience. And having grown up with a Christian leaning, I was taught and firmly believed that God bestowed spiritual gifts onto his people. I thought of mine as being able to hear God and pray all the time. We, his followers, could use these gifts to spread his truth. Lee, my counselor, understood that faith, and he asked me about what I had identified as my greatest spiritual gift. He had me dig deep, deeper than prayer, and I told him that I truly felt my gift, my special God-given calling, was simply the ability to love other people, no matter their circumstance. Here is where it gets radical, folks. Lee suggested that using my spiritual gift could be a type of prayer. It seems sacrilegious to me to claim that anything other than a one-on-one conversation with God in the various forms of, what are they? Gimme, oops, ouch, and praise and wow, are those various forms. Outside of that, it didn't seem like anything else could be called prayer. So at the same time, though, the statement resonated with me in a way that nothing in my learned religion ever had before. It suggested to me that people, actual people, might have a bit of divinity in each of them. If I could pray and have communion with God by just practicing love, I could have a floodgate of prayer open for me. So long as I felt that I was being purposeful in my actions and interactions, I found I could be in communion with the divine on a much larger scale almost all the time. My picture of prayer changed that day in counseling, and it's still evolving. It might not look the same to you. Maybe your connection with the divine is through music. Maybe it's through medicine or it's through teaching. The thing I've learned is that it really does not matter what prayer looks like. Prayer can happen anywhere, in any stance, at any time of day. It can take many forms, ranging from reciting sacred text, to coffee with Jesus, to meditation, to simply interacting with your fellow man in a purposeful way that makes their lives a little bit better. But prayer doesn't just happen because you're alive. It must be mindful and purposeful, with the clear intent of communing with a higher power, sending energy into the world, or using spiritual gifts through the course of everyday life. many years ago, Cal Furnish gave a talk in which he quoted the movie Avatar, yes, with the blue people, and the way that they greet one another is by saying, "I see you." And he compared that to the Hindu practice in yoga where we end by saying namaste, which basically means that the divine in me recognizes and acknowledges and worships or is awed by the divine in you. So they do the same thing in the movie Avatar, the I see you. And this is what I'm talking about here. Communing with a higher power, sending energy into the world and using spiritual gifts in the course of everyday life. In a world where every person is vastly different from the next and faiths range across a broad spectrum, it seems to make sense that prayer should look as different as we do and as the many gifts that we have to offer. So, throughout the remainder of this month of prayer/meditation and beyond that, I hope you can stop and consider your own personal schema, your collection of life experiences that inform the way you understand and conceive prayer. Our experiences may have led us to see prayer as a 4-letter word sometimes, but why not take it back and don't count, Ian.
Sorry.
6 letters, but you know what I mean. But why not take it back and redefine it for your own use? Prayer is not exclusively a Christian concept. If my recitation of the Lord's Prayer or Hail Mary gave you traumatic flashbacks, here's your chance. Seize the opportunity to completely change your schema of prayer. Ask yourself what makes you feel the most connected to the divine, either the divine in the great inverted bowl that is the sky or the divine in the person sitting next to you. And then go do that thing. Know that your schema can shift and stretch to embrace the many interpretations of what prayer looks like and the role it plays in your lives. At the beginning of this talk, we looked at the way Christians and Jews and Hindus and Muslims and Buddhists engage in prayer. So what is the you way of taking part in prayer? Maybe it's just spirit of life. Maybe it's more than that. As a tribe or as individuals, we get to decide. So may it be so. Go out and define prayer for yourself. Thank you. Now we have a hymn, Blessed Spirit of My Life. Hit it, Ian.
Okay.
All right, folks. Next is the offering. So here's the baskets. We'll pass them virtually. You can either send a check to Ramona Stein, that's Stine, our treasurer, to 1590 Sugarland Drive, number B/206, number B. It's great. In Sheridan, Wyoming. Or you can also go visit our website, SheridanUU.org, and there's a link in there to Tithely.
There's also
So
a
virtual
Tidely-
kids. We're in the 20th century,
there
21st
should-
even.
There's a Tidely right on the
Oh,
YouTube. as
even
well.
right here on the YouTube, folks. We're making it so easy. Give us all your money. Just joking. Okay. So our closing. Oh yeah. Let's bless this offering, and thank you all for supporting the UU, because honestly, in times where we're not in person, it's just so lean, and so like anything that you can do or willing to give, like, thank you. So let's bless the offering together, shall we? Let this be an offering to sustain and strengthen this place, which is so sacred to many of us, a community of memory and hope, for we are the keepers of the dream. Thank you. All right, our closing words today. Scroll. All right, it's from David Steindl Rast. Prayer is not sending in an order and expecting it to be fulfilled. Prayer is attuning yourself to the life of the world, to love, the force that moves the sun and the moon and the stars. I had a hard time choosing that reading because really I was like, no, it's actually gravity and inertia that moves the sun and the moon and the stars, but why not love?
Love.
Yeah, why not love too? Okay, so we'll start the discussion right now.
And I might just, before we jump into the discussion,
Please.
I might just interject an announcement.
Yay, do it.
So Barbara, Walter, and Bernie have reserved a space at Kendrick Park so that UU members can gather for a little social time. So that way it's in its own time outside of service, and we're going to continue doing service online for the time being. But these times are, so if you have your calendars ready, the times that we're gathering at Kendrick Park are Wednesday, August 26th from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. and it'll be at the number 3 East Covered Shelter.
Nice.
So that's August 26th. And Tuesday, September 15th from 5:30 to 7:30 at the number 1 Monument Shelter, also at Kendrick Park.
And we can send that out in the email next week as well.
Yeah, we'll get that out, but I wanted to get everybody a heads up that those things are coming. And the idea is that these are socially distanced gatherings. We're not going to be hugging each other. And it's not a potluck. You'll need to bring your own picnic. Bring a chair if you want to help us spread out. And we'll hope to see you at one or both of these outings. Thanks, Barbara, and thank you, Bernie.
That's awesome.
Okay. Great. And we do have some folks writing in already for the discussion.
Cool.
And general addings in. Sue Roberts says, thank you for playing the Islamic call to prayer. It is beautiful, and I have never heard it in entirety or seen visual representation of Mecca. So.
Isn't that amazing? Those visuals were stunning. Thanks for finding that, Ian.
Oh, and I guess I just want to add a little info about the big black cube at the heart of that center there. It's called the Kaaba, and the belief surrounding it is that Abraham restored it, and it had fallen into disrepair after Noah rebuilt it after the flood, and was initially constructed by Adam. So that's the I hesitate to call it mythology surrounding the structure itself, but it certainly is ancient. It's an ancient.
Who's to say mythology doesn't mean it's true?
Yeah, there's definitely an ancient shrine that's been on that location as far back as human memory goes, and that's there at Mecca. So. And
then another little out of order. There's a request to read a concern from Bruce Andrews.
Yeah.
He has a concern for all teachers who risk what might be brought to them from the outside, and staff too, as well as students.
Thank you, Bruce.
And then Catherine Osborne wrote in to say, thank you for sharing the evolution of your thoughts about prayer, Jules. Wonderful food for thought.
Thank you. What is it? Is that
That's from
Catherine
Catherine
Osborne.
Oh, all right. Thanks, Catherine.
Yeah. I loved talking about schema and Mr. Rainey. That
Mr.
really
Rainey.
brings back some
I love that guy.
It's fantastic.
I love that guy. He's a pretty great guy.
So, something about prayer is the intentionality of it, right?
Yeah.
And I guess I'm wondering what your thoughts are on if someone might be praying and not realizing that they're praying, or if to consider it prayer, you would say you would have to be conscious of it in the act.
That's a really interesting question. So, okay, I'm just going to answer your question with a story. So, back in the day, I was raised up real weird, kids. I don't know if you can imagine that, but I was in this super weird, let's call a spade, cult, in which they had you start speaking in tongues and interpreting at age 5. And so, yeah, it was really hilarious, actually, because we'd all just say the same exact nonsense words over and over. And the adults around would be like, oh my God, these kids are feeling the spirit. And we'd all just be like, shamalama lama lama ding dong or whatever, And we thought it was kind of hilarious. And it most certainly was by no means prayer, even though it was the same actions as the adults were doing. They said the same kind of complete garbage as we did, but some of them were really feeling it. We certainly were not at the age of 5. And that act, I was doing the actions. I was doing all the actions. And I would even say that and in many occasions thereafter in my life in that like same faith tradition, I was doing the actions and feeling nothing. Then at some point, I remember doing yoga and like in college, and I learned about directional breathing. You know what I mean? Like where, there's an area that's really tight, and you send an intention basically with your breath to loosen that area, and it worked. And I remember feeling like if I have an intention, if I have something that I'm going to like put my focus and my energy on, I can make something happen there. And that rings true for, I go to school and I have a student who is just bummed out, and I set an intention at the beginning of class, I'm going to make that kid smile by the end of this class period. And I do it. Is that prayer? You tell me. I don't know. You can say whatever you want. I feel like that is me in communion with the divine that is in that child, right? Or if if I'm like in my garden and I'm saying, okay, I'm going to remove that tangle vine that wraps up around my raspberry and chokes him to death. I'm going to remove that so that this thing can live. Oh, killing so something else can live.
That's a prayer
but yeah,
exorcism.
Yeah, it's a prayer of exorcism. Big down, demon. Anyway, so but like if I'm working in my garden and my goal is to grow something beautiful and I make it happen, like is that prayer? I mean, again, you tell me. That's my whole point, is that this is open up to interpretation. But I think that, like I said in the talk, if you're doing something with purpose, and that I feel like that pretty much is all that's required for me. And also, as I said in the prayer or in the talk, prayer looks so vastly different person to person. So maybe you're saying, Jules, you're completely full of crap, and it doesn't. You weeding your garden and you making a kid smile is not prayer. Like, fine, say whatever you want. It's prayer to me. So up yours. Just joking. I don't mean that. I'm just kidding. I just said up yours at church. I'm super sorry. So I have a comment coming in from a dear friend that says, it's prayer. Something can be considered prayer when it's done out of love, even if we are not aware of it being prayer. If it's out of love, then it's prayer, because God in any religion is love. Thus, every act out of love, every thought out of love is prayer, even if we're not aware of it. Like you said, we all have divinity in us because of that God power, because of the above. Sometimes the above uses us to love, even when we don't realize that that's what it is. I really like that. Thank you, Emily.
And there's a couple, Katherine Johnson says along those lines, I think if more people saw prayer as purposeful love and concern for others, this whole society would be in a much better place.
Ugh, if only. I'm with you, sister. Let's get a little more of that in the world.
And Victor says,
Also, recognizing that I just set up yours to anyone. Super sorry, I don't mean it. I love all of you so much. Oh, Lord. Oh, gosh. Okay, go ahead. Victor.
Victor says, what I get from your talk, Jules, is that prayer needs to be genuine.
I really like that. Yeah, genuine. Yeah, especially after the story I told where we're like 5-year-olds speaking in tongues. That's done because the adults tell you to. But if I'm doing something like because I have compassionate care for something, it's like in that Thich Nhat Hanh thing, connecting to the great, evoking the presence of the great compassion. And that's capital G, capital C, evoking the presence of the great compassion. Let us fill our hearts with our own compassion towards ourselves and towards all living beings. So that's like a form of prayer to me. It's just like being in compassion with your fellow man. And like Emily said, like, is it done out of love? If it's done out of love, then whether you realize it or not, that is a form of communion, which is another 4-letter word in Unitarian Universalism to some degree.
I was thinking about something. The last time that Victor talked through his like various beliefs, like the things that he stated, like in this way, I'm an existentialist.
Yes,
Maybe
I
he
like
didn't say
that.
that. In that way,
I'm a humanist.
I'm a humanist.
Yeah, I remember this.
And I was thinking about that because I very much agreed with him
It's like the buffet of
on a lot of
religious
those
thought.
things. And I was just thinking, like, in terms of that genuineness and that commitment and that, well, here's another 4-letter word, devotion to those beliefs, that any of those and all of those might be met with a type of a prayer, like in terms of humanism, it's this prayer for justice. The prayer isn't being prayed to someone, but it's being prayed toward humanity or for humanity, and it might live itself out in the way that you give your time or wealth or and I especially resonate with the idea of pantheism, which is like it doesn't have to do with pan, it has to do with like everything is imbued with divinity, everything is sacred, right? And so that reminded me of your story about tending a garden would be, I definitely feel a deep spiritual connection as I dig in the dirt, as I, weed out the weeds.
Harvest fruits and vegetables,
It could be found anywhere, but it's the mindset that you bring to it.
I want to quote the Disney version of Pocahontas.
Okay.
And I know every rock and tree and creature has a life, has a spirit, has a name.
Nice.
There you go.
Cal has a discussion comment here.
All right.
Jules, wonderful timing for me to hear your presentation today. Even though I can always talk a pretty good game on seeing the divine, I suspect I'm not alone these days in finding it difficult much of the time to just do that. So I appreciate your helping me to remember not only to see the divine in others, but also in myself. Works much better than berating myself for being a spiritually bereft slug, right? And
no one would ever call you that, Cal.
I don't think so. And sure enough, I do see you and myself as well. Thanks.
Oh, Cal, I see you. Cal, great point. Like it's easy to stand here and be like, there's divine in all of us. And then, on my drive home, inevitably NPR will be like, President Trump has done something again. And I'll be like, that dumb son of a... Then I'm like losing my mind and not seeing the divine. I had this goal last year, my New Year's resolution, which just fell apart, to be more like my husband's grandma Ione, who is truly the kindest, most generous person in the world, emotionally generous. Like someone, the family's sitting around and saying, "Oh, do you hear about so and so did this and robbed this person blind?" And she will, without fail, find something positive about that person. Oh, but she makes the best apple crumble, or something. She'll find something to praise about a person and to be grateful about. And I desperately want to be like that. I want to train myself to be like that, because it is just one way of seeing the divine in other people, is to find one thing, like, oh, but that person has a green thumb, or oh, but so they did the nicest thing for this one person this one time. Just to hold on to that divine will, in fact, maybe strengthen the divine in me. So, Cal, you are a slug never. You're just the best, and thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, and Bruce Andrews wanted to mention as well, love and concern for oneself as being really important. And Holly wrote into defining love, I believe, love, listen, observe, validate, and educate.
I like that.
I like that.
Listen. Oh, that's a big one.
Observe.
Validate.
And
Educate. And Bruce, you're right. Like, especially in times of like COVID and self-quarantine and everything, that self-love and being able to foster that self-divinity and foster that care. It's also such a good way to lead by example for, Sam sees you and Joe and Amy doing that, and Doug and Gabriella for yourselves. If he sees that, that's something that he'll learn. And it's something Kim Anderson, the former vice principal at the junior high, said something at some point to Mitch. I'm assuming it was Mitch. He said, your children will consistently fail to do as you say, but they will never fail to do as you do. And so if we can model self-love and model love for others, that makes the next generation just that much better. And Holly, I'm straight up using that thing. I saw something else that was like that with the acronym, but it was family. Forget about me. I love you.
Oh.
I know, isn't that sweet? But also, don't forget about me, kids. Yeah. Self-love. Anyway, any others?
Let's see.
Oh, yeah. Jolynn says, if God is love, like the type of love that the Greeks called agape, then I believe in God.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jolynn.
Jolynn.
That's per Bruce. That might be from Bruce as well.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Agape.
Yeah.
That's like unconditional love, right?
Yeah.
It's Hebrew.
Is it from Hebrew?
I think it is. Okay. Allow me to look. It looks like agape, which means that your mouth is wide open. Oh. But it's a Greco-Christian term. Yeah, it's Greek. Highest form of love, charity, the love of God for man and of man for God. With your mouth wide open.
Cool.
Just kidding.
It says that. Add it in.
I mean, I'm just reading the definition. Tacking on to the last part, if this is a comment given in. If you don't see the divine in yourself, you can't give the love or the prayer to others. If we don't see ourselves, can't love elsewhere. We must selflessly choose ourselves so that we can be a light and love and prayer to someone else. But if we don't see that in us, we can't give that. It's a really good way to wrap that up. I'll kind of tie all those strings together.
Yes.
Cool. Feeling good?
Well, great.
All right, everybody.
Ian,
mind helping me out? We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next Sunday. Guess who's going to be talking? It's Ian. All right. Rock out.